That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about Humane, the directorial debut of Caitlin Cronenberg, which had its premiere at the Calgary Underground Film Festival shortly before IFC Films is releasing it, April 26th, 2024.
This is the daughter of David Cronenberg.
Yes, we are straight from the brood of Cronenberg. Her brother is also a director, of course, Brandon Cronenberg. And you might remember her as a guest judge on Canada's Drag Race.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't remember, but that's cool.
Hmm.
What is Humane about? In the wake of an environmental collapse that is forcing humanity to shed 20% of its population, a family dinner erupts into chaos when a father's plan to enlist in the government's new euthanasia program goes horribly awry. What's your pull quote?
Despite its laudable foray into the moral turpitude of elitism, Humane always sticks to the obvious, aiming for satire but settling on stale with this defanged pit of vacuous vipers.
Oh, mine. An interesting start that increasingly becomes more tedious as the runtime progresses. Humane makes the mistake of wanting us to root for unlikable people.
Which I usually have no problem doing, but you have to be interesting or intelligent in some way. And these people were all just a little bit basic for me.
So the story takes place over the course of one day, and we see that globally resources have dwindled to a point where overpopulation is very serious. So in the United States, the government has started a program where people can voluntarily enlist to be euthanized. And on this day, we focus on a man named Charles, played by Peter Gallagher, and he is a famous retired newscaster, and he's married to a woman named Dawn, played by Uni Park, and she's like a famous chef. They have 4 children, and the 4 children are asked to meet for dinner, like an early dinner. And it's obvious right away that the family, they must have issues because they do not seem happy to all be together. So let's start with the children. First, we have Rachel, played by Emily Hampshire, who I know from Schitt's Creek.
And Snowcake.
And Snowcake with Sigourney Weaver. She is not a likable person, and there's some scandal behind her name. Do you recall what it was? Like she developed something that people have an issue with?
A product that's harmful
Yeah.
to its consumer.
And the children were asked to come along. Like, don't bring your significant others, don't bring your kids, like just you. But she brings along her teenage daughter, Mia.
Mhm.
Then we have Jay Baruchel playing Jared. And Jared is an anthropologist who's working with the current administration. So he's kind of like famous for the moment because he's doing press. So he's on news programs trying to explain the voluntary euthanasia program. He's also not a very likable person. Then we have Noah, played by Sebastian Chacon. We understand he's adopted and he is a drug addict in recovery. He was also involved in a very bad car accident that left someone dead. So he walks with a cane, which I think is important that he's injured. And lastly, we have Ashley, played by Alanna Bale, who I swore the entire film was an Olsen, like the Olsen sister, the older one or the younger one.
Well, the twins are the older ones, and then
Who's the younger one?
Elizabeth.
I swore that was Elizabeth Olsen until I looked it up.
Mm.
But anyway, she's an aspiring actor. They all are at dinner when the dad says, well, y'all know about the program, and I decided that myself and my wife are going to enlist, and the children blow up. And this is all in the trailer. But the real gag is that this man planned, so when people enlist, they have to set an appointment for the euthanizers to come to the house, not unlike when you get your internet turned on.
Mhm.
And the person who comes to the house is a guy named Bob, played by Enrico Colantoni, who I know from Galaxy Quest.
Oh yeah, and he was in Just Shoot Me, a bunch of stuff. But yeah, Malthazar,
Yeah,
Galaxy
my
Quest.
favorite character from Galaxy Quest. But he shows up and he's like, all right, well, I'm here for these two bodies y'all signed up for. And that's when we realize that Dawn, the wife, she ducked out. She left a note saying, sorry, I can't do this. So the dad, Peter Gallagher, is like, oh, okay, well, maybe we can reschedule because I'm sure once I talk to my wife, she'll go through with this because we had already discussed it. And Bob, Enrico Colantoni's character, he says, ain't no rescheduling. Like I'm here to collect two bodies and I'm leaving with two bodies. So basically, we find out that the government is subcontracting these people to euthanize and collect bodies. And these subcontractors get paid per body. So they're not leaving without a body. Now, we also understand that they can cancel, and we see Peter Gallagher try to cancel, but then he has to sign something and he says, I'm not signing this. And we don't learn until later why he wouldn't sign it. He wouldn't sign it because anyone who cancels their enlistment, they get put on like a national registry of cowards.
Mhm.
And it would seem that Peter Gallagher's character is very concerned with his image. So he does not want to be seen as a coward. So he says, nope, I'm doing it. So Peter Gallagher gets euthanized. And Bob says, okay, so who's my next body? I'm going to give you all like 2 hours to think about it. Of course, they can decide. And that's when Rachel, Emily Hampshire's character, asks Bob, well, can we just give you a body? And he's like, do you have a body in the freezer somewhere? Like, what are you talking about? And she's like, don't worry about that. Can we just give you a body? And he's like, yeah, I can work with that. So her plan was she's just going to kill someone. And she wants to kill her junkie adopted brother. But the three biological children are all pretty like, it would seem that Noah is like tougher than they thought because they try to attack him, but he ends up like disarming all three of his siblings. Meanwhile, the teenage daughter Mia, Bob has taken her. So he's holding her hostage in a trailer in front of the house. But ultimately, they decide to not kill each other, which we need to talk about.
Uh-huh.
And then they decide they're just going to take down Bob and his people. They are successful in holding Bob captive and convincing him to find a way to make it look like they don't need to take any bodies. But it's also important to know that Noah has a girlfriend, and the girlfriend comes over because she hasn't heard from her boyfriend, and she ends up getting killed. So they use her body, and then Ashley, the actress sister, she was badly injured in all of this, and so she ends up dying. So they just take her body. The end.
Yep, and then the whole family that's surviving is at an event, sitting in the audience, and and Don has shown back up as well.
Don's back, and Noah, the junkie, is now a concert pianist.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay, the opening of the film, I thought, oh, this is really interesting, and it was giving me like at first I'm like, oh, this might be like The Purge, but maybe a little smarter because there's a lot of like social commentary that I thought felt like we were going to get into something a little more interesting and complex. But then it becomes so basic, like you said, and like all of the characters, the siblings, I think are so basic and one-dimensional. And then it's so obvious that they want to choose the adopted brother who's a drug addict.
Yes, and I think they could have played with the cliches that are inherent in this type of scenario quite a bit more. I think the kernel of the story initially is interesting, but as the plot twists are unveiled and the family alliances unspool, it just gets really kind of dull, and you wish that they would all just die.
Yeah, yeah. So this I would say is it like I don't think I would call it a horror thriller. I would call it like a dark comedy that's not funny enough.
It feels like something that would have been cut from a series like a Black Mirror or some Twilight Zone revamp, because this stuff has all been done before, and yes, it's speaking to some contemporary cultural climate issues, but it also feels very Canadian. Like this is a very uh, the jab at how things are in the United States, which is terrible in a lot of ways. But I don't think this would not work if this was introduced in such a way. I think this family, the Yorks, not everybody would be so detached and ambivalent about these one percenters just uh, getting to go about their daily lives. I think they would have had to build a fortress around their house, and then I think it would be interesting to realize that that fortress is ultimately what undoes them, because when they're trapped by the euthanizing subcontractors, like a fence.
Yeah, I mean, to elaborate on that, it's like the family is really acting like this isn't a thing that's happening. But then to contrast that, we see news footage of people protesting. We see people waiting in very long lines to get basic needs met. But then this family lives in this really nice house, and they're acting like nothing's going on. Like this is an inconvenience for them. And then we find out that the dad, Peter Gallagher, has millions of dollars at his disposal to pay off something, which we'll get to, and then still have a bunch of money left. So none of it felt right. But I was thinking, it's like watching The Purge, where you have so many questions, and you're like, that would never work, blah blah blah. But then it makes up for it in that there's a lot of action, right? But this movie, because there's not a lot of action, I thought, oh, it's going to be smarter than that. But it's not. So then I'm still thinking, like you said, there's so many questions and things that we could have, because it does feel thin, like an episode of something.
It feels
So
thin. We rush into having all these people together to realize that they're all terrible. But I almost wish we had spent a little more time with maybe Peter Gallagher being more of like a Dan Rather type, who's very well known for his outspoken liberalism and saying all all the correct things he does, and how we could peek behind that kind of a curtain and be like, oh, you're really a hypocrite. Because
that's a
I
good
think that's
point. Yeah, that's a good point because he seems yeah, how did his kids turn out like this? Because
I mean, Jay Baruchel, who I guess is just going to be in every semi-notable Canadian feature now, is just vile, like vile to the extent of if this were a realistic scenario in the US, in California, people would be burning down these mansions in Beverly Hills. Like no, nobody would be like, yeah, I'm going to be part of the 20% to kill myself.
let me get through these notes. So the opening contributing to the comedic aspect of it, we see Bob, the euthanizer, in his van, and he's driving along and they're listening to happy music. But they're listening to happy music while they're going to homes ready to basically kill people. And then we see that Jay Baruchel is on the news, and he's implying that the administration may want to lower the enlistment age uh, to get more people. And then the reporter says, oh, so like children? And he's like, well, I didn't say children, but actually my 10-year-old son. And then, of course, the reporter grabs onto that, like, you want to enlist your 10-year-old son? And then, of course, that kind of goes viral. And then we get a phone call from Jay Baruchel's wife, like the mother of the child, upset. Like, why did you get on TV and say you want to euthanize our son? So things go off the rail very quickly.
Yeah, I
The
think you haven't seen the Ballad of Narayama, either version, but where in this Japanese village at an automatic age, like 70, they cart the elderly off to this island where they starve to death and die. Like we needed those kind of conversations to be happening, because it doesn't make sense that they would lower the enlistment age, when shouldn't the pressure be to for those in charge to be getting rid of the undesirables, like, or maybe secretly the quota is not being met. So what if we heard that they're rounding up the unhoused on the streets, or people are using, what if this family had taken some unhoused people and said, here's the bodies we need, something like that.
Right, right. Like in anticipation of this. Well, because then it's like, okay, so why is the dad doing this? Why does he want to enlist? And he basically says that he's like, he feels guilty for like having these kids and using resources. But really, it would seem that because he's a public figure, he wants to set a good example. And then the kids basically say, oh, you're disappointed in us because we ain't shit and people don't like us. So this way your legacy is secured as being this like martyr who did this for the people. So I thought that was interesting. At that dinner, when things start to go left, Jay Baruchel's character, because he's trying to explain the rules and how these rules aren't made for people like us. So again, I kind of wish that at least I almost wish like all of the siblings didn't seem so vile initially because Bob, the euthanizer, he's done this many times, so he knows how to get under these family skin. So he has like a dossier for each family member, and they've like done recon on each of them because they have access through the government from like their text messages and medical history and all that. So he's handed every family member, after he tells them they have to decide who they're going to kill, he hands each of them like a resume that basically says like everyone's secrets. And so they're basically all like vile people. I kind of wish there would have been a moment as the audience where like I thought like, oh, this is going to be so challenging because they're a loving family and they're all doing good things. How would they ever choose? We have this one who's a new mother, this one who takes care of this one who runs like a like good people.
Like the
And then,
Sattler.
yeah. And then after you start reading all the little details, it's like, oh, because even Jay Baruchel's character, he I didn't like that I wasn't sure what they were trying to say about him because he's really embarrassed about what's in his portfolio, but we don't see it or know what it is. But then at a point, I almost assumed it was like some freaky sex stuff because we see him like, it looks like he's masturbating and playing with his nipples as he's reading I thought that was a little bit too much,
I
but
did I did find it amusing that Ashley, Alanna Bale, gets a hold of her dossier and it's
oh, I wrote down what it said in her dossier. They have notes from casting directors because she's trying to be an actor, and the notes were no star quality, lacks charisma, and can't carry a tune, and she's melodramatic, and she freaks out. I
that
thought
re
that was funny.
that reminded me of, remember, was it, what year was it where that movie studio, was it Paramount's emails were getting leaked?
Yes,
And
yes,
and all that stuff about, what did they say about Angelina Jolie, that she's
yes.
minorly talented brat or something?
Yeah, I remember that. But before all that happens at the dinner table, after everyone blows up at the news of what the dad has said, Dawn, the wife, goes, you know what? Let's continue this after dessert. There's so many little comedic elements that just feel so odd. Also, we get these little commercials of like the government is showing like they're highlighting enlisters of the week and they're
Mhm.
telling the stories of the people who volunteered. I thought those were nice touches.
They were. It's just I think it just is too obvious with the social commentary. I think that if it could have been a little more sly, and even for instance the family dynamics where Noah, who's a person of color, has the drug addiction issues, of course, and is the one that is the center of these fluctuating alliances, because at first Ashley is on his side until money becomes involved and she realizes she'll get more of her father's inheritance. I think it would have been more interesting if there was one of the biological siblings had become politicized or radicalized in a way that made them the black sheep, and that the adopted son or sibling was the one that was more woven into the texture of the family to show the corrupting power of money. Because this, again, I can't, it just seems so obvious.
Yeah, like they made the adopted son a drug addict. So of course the other siblings, like he's worthless, we'll kill him. But getting back to the social commentary, first we learned that the administration is referring to this sort of crisis as the Asian collapse because they're blaming Asian nations for overpopulation. And then Dawn, the wife, happens to be Asian. So we find out that her restaurant, like this swanky restaurant, because she's a celebrity chef, was burned down, like effectively a hate crime. But I thought the most interesting um, commentary that really wasn't expounded upon is that we find out that really the administration, this is all voluntary, but they're targeting like minority groups, underrepresented people, like undocumented immigrants are allowed to enroll in the program, and they're incentivized with financial benefits. And also they're told that if these undocumented immigrants enlist, their children are promised a fast track to citizenship. So, you could read a lot into these things. I almost wish they would have done like we start to learn that you know, Black people, Latinos, different classes of people are being targeted with different programs, like marketing, how they market cigarettes and such. Like, yeah, we just get the comment about undocumented immigrants, and then that's kind of it. Jay
Well, yeah.
Baruchel makes some comments that basically saying like I'm not racist, and
Well, one, those comments would have been more effective when he's talking about he's not into institutionalized racism, et cetera, if he was directed at his actual biological sibling while he's trying to save the one of color. And that would have added some interesting layers to it. But yeah, I think it just seems like it's edging towards something. It's like, oh, what if they could have had a whole thing in there about the dreamers? And like if the parents of dreamers offer to euthanize themselves, then automatically all of them they get citizenship and can finally travel wherever they want.
Jay Baruchel's character says, I don't see color. This doesn't have anything to do with white privilege or systemic anything. Like he's so out of touch. And so it's like little moments, but it does feel very superficial.
I think
Um,
Emily Hampshire is really good at playing unlikable people. If you've also seen her in Mother, she also notably worked for Caitlin's father, David, in the film Cosmopolis. But all I could think of was her being in this feels like Don't Give a Shit's Creek.
no, we do see, because Bob, Enrico Colantoni's character is like snooping around Peter Gallagher's office, and he sees because Peter Gallagher is like a famous reporter. He has pictures with a bunch of celebrities like Bono. He has a picture with Beyonce. I thought those were funny. Again, this movie to me is more humorous than anything. Um,
Which is why the comedic writing needed to be sharper. And this is from a screenwriter named Michael Sparaga, who's written a couple other features, but uh, I don't know, it needed some fine tuning.
so beyond the obvious choice of like, well, they want to select their adopted brother because he's a drug addict, and then we find out that he was involved in an accident that resulted in someone being killed, and then we find out because they're also concerned about collecting their dad's inheritance, and Bob is sort of explaining to them like, well, if you choose one of you guys, like you get a bigger portion of your inheritance. But then they end up finding out that Noah, the junkie, his dad paid like a settlement of $3 million to avoid like him getting like sued or pursued for criminal charges or something. So then it's like, wow. So they're really making him be like the obvious choice. So it just felt like this could have worked if they made it more like an escape movie where he is like the protagonist and he has to escape his siblings. But that portion of the film is kind of short and ineffective because the siblings can't fight worth a damn. Like the junkie who walks with a cane whooped all their asses twice.
And he's the one
So
that keeps saying, like, I just want us to be a family. Uh,
yeah, and he doesn't want to fight them. He's actually like the nicest character.
I think if this had gone in a direction or a tone of Wes Craven's original People Under the Stairs, where the only way out is in, again, it just feels like there's so many more interesting ideas if they just peeled back the layers of this onion a little bit more.
I was really annoyed because they only have 2 hours to decide, time is running out. So they try to kill Noah, but he whoops all their asses and I think he stabs all of them. So now they're all injured on the ground, the three siblings, because remember the teenage daughter is stuck with Bob in a trailer out front. And then after this writing for this scene was so ridiculous to me. Noah stabs his three siblings, and then they all just say, like, you know what? We just each one of them says, I deserve to die. So just choose me. Like, go on ahead and kill me. I just thought that was crazy. So like now you want to,
You know what? Stab me once, shame on me. Stab me twice.
so then they decide, no, we have a plan. Let's take down Bob and the other people. But there are several people because it's Bob, his assistant, and then like some armed like security people. And that really didn't play out very well for me. Like how they couldn't fight their physically disabled brother, but they're gonna beat up these armed soldiers. Okay.
Which again, which why doesn't none of them even think that can we get out the back way? Because since there's not that many men really watching us, which is where and then their stepmother's restaurant burned down, so she's a notable figure that's been targeted, but they don't target her home. Like nobody's worried about the home front.
Yeah, there are gaps in the story that again, in like if this would have been more action packed and vibrant, then I think I would have forgotten those things. But because we spent a lot of time with these people kind of flailing themselves about and complaining and arguing with each other, it just left a lot of room to scrutinize the story. I have to say, I thought the daughter, Mia, was so annoying. She's just whining, and then she's in this trailer with Bob, and they're playing cards, and he's trying to be funny, which I do think Enrico Colantoni is very cute as Bob, but then he's paired with this like bratty teenage girl who, granted, has had her family hijacked, and a couple of deaths are going to occur, so she has every right to be scared, but she's acting more like a brat. And
Which is a reflection of her intelligence, because if she were really smart, she would be trying to find a way to manipulate Bob, but whatever.
I thought the end of the movie was cute because the end of the movie is one of those ads for enlisters of the week, and it's the sister Ashley, and then Grace, who's the girlfriend of Noah, who's now a concert pianist. Because we find out earlier in the film that he's now working at like a mall. Like he's dating the Grace works at the mall. She manages like a Big Five sporting goods. And then he works part-time playing piano at the mall. And at first they make fun of him, but the dad is like, no, that's perfect. The other thing too is it's obvious that the dad seems to have the most affection towards the adopted son. And I wish they would have, like you said, if we would have spent more time with him, we could have got a better sense of his politics, his ideologies, maybe understand better how his kids turned out like assholes and why he's more connected to his adopted child.
Or
But
if or if the dinner had been pressuring one of his bio kids that he can't stand to enlist.
more that, yeah. And then they
Anything.
get and they become enraged. The other thing is the kids are assholes and they seem greedy. Wouldn't you think they'd be happy that their dad's gonna and like the wife's like now they're gone and they get money. Like I didn't quite understand how like their reactions seemed like they were so upset because they love these people, but in reality they're fighting over money. So wouldn't have they been like shouldn't they have been happy that
Yeah, Ashley is swayed very easily to rally against Noah just at the thought that her inheritance would be larger.
would
I
be
mean,
that much bigger? Yeah. So why are you all acting hysterical when your dad says, I'm gonna die now so you can get my money? Like
another part of the Cronenberg stable that's involved in this production is the director of photography, Douglas Koch, who shot Crimes of the Future, which is a film I
oh.
really liked by
I did
David.
like I did think the film looked nice. Unfortunately, this was on the level of that movie we reviewed, Founders Day.
It's better than that.
It is, I mean, yes, and it like the production value is higher, but I just think the story just feels they need to spend more time on this story and not try to be funny because it's not funny enough.
Or,
To,
or go and lean into one or the other, because
yeah,
it's definitely, yeah, it's not a horror film. It's a social satire. So why not actually be that? And none of the actors, I think, were felt like we're giving false notes. It's just that the characters they're playing are ultimately boring. I mean that's the real problem with it, is that nothing pops enough for us to gravitate towards, uh either to love or hate. Like
I,
I don't dislike any of them enough to feel any kind of vitriol.
I believe this is going to stream on Shudder.
Yes, they are distributing the VOD release.
So I guess if people have Shudder, they can check it out. What would you give Humane?
I'm interested in seeing Cronenberg's kids continue to test the waters of their talents, but I would give Humane 2.
I didn't care for this one. I would give Humane 2 out of 5. Anything else?
No.
Join us on Patreon and listen to our podcast. Bye.